So in this video, we're going to start building workflows. So over here on the left, you can see we have our directory structure set up for our tutorial workflow. We've imported our reads, and now we want to create our first workflow. So we go to the upper right with the workflows icon and select a new workflow. And now we have this canvas here to start building our workflow. First thing I'm going to want to do is save this workflow, and I'm going to save it into the workflows folder in my SARS-CoV-2 tutorial directory, and we're going to call this, just call this step 1, and it's the QC step where we're going to do that initial QC analysis. Okay, and now we can see that work in the workflow in there, step 1 QC. And the QC that we're going to use is going to be found down on the left. So when building the workflows, you select modules on the left side of your screen down here in the tools, and you drag them is one of the ways that you could drag them onto the canvas, or you could go here and select add element and select them there. We'll do it this way. Let's see, we're going to look for QC. We see under prepare sequencing data, QC for sequencing reads. This is what we would like. So this will be the first step in our workflow. And this QC for sequencing reads is very similar to the FastQC that many of you might be familiar with from PulseNet activities. And when you first put a module on your workflow, everything's basically in red because we don't have any inputs, we don't have any outputs selected, we haven't configured it. So the first thing we want to do is create an input. So here we'll say connect to workflow input, and we'll drag that up. And we know this workflow input is going to be Illumina reads, paired reads. So we're going to say paired Illumina reads to rename it in a way that we understand what it is. And this is going to be the QC, and doesn't have any configuration. I double clicked on it. And then we have these options, these outputs. So now the only one we're really going to be concerned with in the workflow we want to build is this graphical report, but you can actually output any of these files or any of these outputs. And so I'll show an example of that. So here we'll say uses workflow output, uses workflow output, and uses workflow output. And not only that, we're going to slightly configure these. I don't like everything being dumped into one folder. I like them to be organized. So in here, I'm going to give a custom output name. Now by default, if I'm in this window and I hit F1, you can see that, let me find the exact section. With these, 1 or 2, it's talking about, it's kind of a placeholder, a variable for what it's going to name that output file. I like using the 2 here, which is the input. So what we're going to do is say 2, which is going to give it the input name. I'm going to add to that, let's call this FastQC because that's what it reminds me of. And not only that, within the results directory, I want to put it into a subdirectory called QC. So I've changed this to QC and the name of the input with a FastQC on the end, and say finish. So now you can see the color has changed slightly here because we've configured that. Here's a, we'll see, we'll just, we're not going to configure the supplemental or duplicate because we're going to delete it after we do this analysis here. But let's do a demo run on this. So this is our very first workflow step. We're going to hit save. Very, very simple. We can see at the bottom after we saved it that the validation was successful, so we don't have any semantic errors or anything like that. So we could hit run. And we imported in these reads the other day. And we want to save this workflow, or the results. We want to save it into the results file, but not only that, we're going to save it under step 1 QC, where that's the workflow that we ran right now. And finish. And this should go pretty quickly. You see the progress down at the bottom, and it's already finished. So now if we go to our results here in the left, and we look at the results for the QC, the graphical report is going to be in that QC folder that was generated here. And we open that up, and it looks very much like your FastQC reports that you may be familiar with, where you're looking at the length distribution, GC content, quality distribution, etc. Okay. And then these other two that we're not going to save or use is a supplemental report and the duplicated sequences QC. They aren't important for the analysis that we're doing here. And then with just about every analysis that's performed, you get a workflow and metadata results table, and we'll discuss these metadata tables in a much later session when we're trying to keep track of lots of data. So that's it for this first step. And just as a reminder, for these tutorials, what I'm really going to emphasize is not necessarily getting into all the minutia of the configuration of the different modules. I want to focus on the higher level on how to create the workflow and get that overall reporting at the end of it. There will be a supplemental or say guidance document that goes along with these videos that'll cover each one of these steps, that'll have screenshots that can be referenced to a lot of additional material for the exact configuration of the steps. So see you next video.